Hello guys, welcome to another J for JavaScript tutorial, and today we'll be looking at arrays. Arrays, as we discovered in the previous videos, is a reference data type, which means it has objects, it has methods and properties. So if you haven't watched the previous videos on data types in JavaScript, I recommend you do that. And in this short tutorial, we'll be looking at some array literals, how we write them, different ways how we write an array literal, array properties like the length and prototype. We'll look at looping through arrays, array methods, some of the most common array methods you'll find in your project, and then finally we'll look at some of the ways we can access array properties. So buckle up and let's get started. So what are arrays? Arrays are simply objects used to store multiple values in a single variable. It's important to know that an array is also an object, but a different type of object. So it's important to know that. So as we said, an array is an object that stores multiple values in a variable. Let's see that in action. Let's start with an array literal. So there are two ways we can write an array literal, and this is one of them. Using the square bracket. Important to know, an array can take in different data types like strings and numbers. So what we just did there is an array literal. If we console log my array, as you see in the console, there you have an array, our object array that has John, 2, and Ben. Another way is using the new keyword. As you can see, it does the same thing, but I highly recommend you use the first option above, where you use the square bracket. It's faster and less code. Alright, let's look at some array properties. Alrighty, so array properties. Some of the common ones is the length property and the prototype. Let's look at the length first. The length property, just like in the numbers and strings, works pretty much the same way in arrays. And we get 3 in the console. So there are 3 elements in an array. So each value in an array is an element. That's important for you to know. And each position is an index where it is located, where that particular value or property is sitting in an array. So arrays, as we know already, use the 0 indexed numbering. So mangoes is seated at the index of 0, apples 1, and grapes 2. So that's always important to remember. Let's look at the prototype property. Okay, so prototype. All the prototype does, it adds new properties and methods to an object. Prototype is a global method in JavaScript, and all objects inherit properties from the prototype. For you to get this, let's write a simple HTML demo code manipulating the DOM for us to see what exactly the prototype does. So I'm assuming you know some HTML, and yeah, let's see that in action. And don't worry about the DOM, that we'll look at later, just follow through. So I'm going to write a simple example of a prototype. And these are one of the main reasons I love CodePen, because everything is in one place and yeah, organized. So let's proceed with the example. Let's write our script tag below here. So this is how we write one. So we're going to create a simple method that converts all our string elements to lowercase. We'll look at looping for loops later. This keyword is referring to the object, the current object you're targeting. Use two lowercase method. Now that our prototype method has been defined, let us create a new array and pass our prototype method to our array. And the way we do that, and now that we have our array, now let's pass our prototype property to this array and tell and convert our uppercase elements to lowercase. And all we do is just call it. Now that we've called it, how do we print it on the website or on the page, on the web page? So we call the ID we gave to our paragraph, which is sample, and then use the .inner HTML to print the results on the web. Sample, which is our ID, then the inner HTML property, then your array. And we should see our array in lowercase. As you can see, we have created a simple property here, method, that converts any array to lowercase using the lowercase method. And as you can see, we have pasted that property. Our array has inherited that property and converted the elements to lowercase. So that's how the prototype works generally. If you want to read more about that, you can read more about that in JavaScript. And it's important to remember that the prototype is global to all objects. So yes, okay, hope that was clear. Let's look at looping through arrays. So looping in arrays, well, looping in general helps us avoid repetitive tasks. No, so let's say, for example, if you have an array that has a list of items and you want to go through the list of items, how do you do that? Do you have to list, if they told you to list 10 items of an array, how would you do that? Well, one way of doing that is accessing the property, the index, and then calling the index individually every time you want to access a different index. For example, so one way of logging out or listing our elements in an array is accessing calling the elements by their indexes. 0, which we know is 1, as you can see. So what happens if you want to list all of them at once, right? Well, using this method, which we'll look at later, you will have to print out the exact number and how many items you want to list in your array, which is very repetitive and tiresome. And one way of doing this in a smarter way is using loops, right? For example, the for loop. So the for loop solves this problem for us. So all it does is define the condition you want it to do, compare with your array, see if sets a condition, a boolean condition. If as long as your condition is still true, it will keep printing out the elements. If it's false, then that's when it stops. Yeah. Well, my list, and this could be anything you want, starting from our index 0. If our list is less than our variable with the length, right? Increment this by 1, which is the last condition we tell it. Then let's square bracket. And now what we should see in the console is a list. As you can see, an iteration through our array from 1, 2 to 7, right? So a for loop is smarter and just makes us write shorter code and very distinctive and descriptive rather than repeating ourselves with what we're doing before. The same thing can be done with a while loop. If we comment this out and paste a simple while loop here, you see that we get the same result in the console. As you can see, it iterates through the array the same way the for loop does. So it's matter to preference how you want to loop through your arrays, whether you want to use the while loop or the for loop. But probably you will be most comfortable with the while loop. That is something for you to know. You can use either the for or the while. Great. Let's look at some array methods. So array methods, just like the loops, iterate through our arrays, but more efficiently and with more options. With array methods, we can filter for specific requirements, specific conditions, find specific indices, which we couldn't, or it is quite harder to do in the for loops or the loops. So that's why we have array method that makes it simpler for us to iterate through our loops, sorry, through our arrays faster and more precise. So let's look at one of the most common one. Let's start with the push, pop, shift, and unshift. So all the push method does is add an element at the end of an array. Now what we should see in the console is 1, 2, 3, 4, because we have added 4 or pushed 4 at the end of an array. The pop does the opposite. It removes an element at the end of an array. So what we should see in the console is 1, 2, right? And there we have it. So the pop removes an element at the end of an array, and the shift, all the shift does is remove an element from the beginning of an array. So what we should see in the console is 2 and 3. Great. And finally, the unshift adds an element from at the beginning of an array. And we should see 0, 1, 2, 3. Wait, as you can see, nice. Next, let's look at the map function. Sorry, map array method. So the map method array method transforms all elements in an array and returns a new array depending on the condition you have passed to your map array method. All array methods return new arrays, so that's important to remember. So we give a condition to our map method and tell it, hey, return a new array based on this condition. So let's write a simple example and divide all our numbers using the map method by 2. So this is how we write one. what we should see in the console is a new array with, as you can see, it has returned a new array with divisions of 2. So 1 divided by 2, 2 divided by 2, it has returned all of them transformed, all based on the condition we passed to the map method. There's a shorter way we can write this condition here above using arrow functions, which are in the ES6 function, ES6 syntax, which we'll look at later. So let's rewrite this using arrow functions. And that is the same as using the above example. So arrow functions are shorter and are more preferred using array methods. Next, let's look at the filter. All the filter does is filter through an array based on the condition you have passed to it. So it always returns a true value, and the false values are never returned. Using the above example, so let's return numbers less than 5 or less than 6. And what you should see in the console is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. As you can see, again, we can rewrite this using the arrow function. And we should get a similar result in the console. Great. Next, let's look at the find. The find array method helps us find a single element in an array. Let's get this. Let's just change this. And what we should see in the console is 6. In our array, find an element that is equal to 6 and return that. You see, we only get 1 returned. You can do the same thing using the arrow functions. And there you go. And if you have noticed, nothing really changes except from the name, the array method name, and the condition you give the array method. So they're really simple to remember. All you have to know is what are you trying to achieve with a specific array method. Are you trying to find a specific ID in an array or in an object? Are you trying to return a new array from a condition you have passed? And everything kind of makes sense. And let's look at our last array method, which is for each. Now the for each is quite different from the find, the filter, or the map because for it doesn't need you to declare variables, doesn't need any return statement. All you have to do is, well, give it a condition just like in a for loop, kind of similar to a for loop, but a better way to iterate through our arrays. Using the same array above, each number return its values, and we should see a list of elements listed through the console, as you can see, from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so forth. That's how easy the for each works. Way better than a for loop and cleaner. We could rewrite this using the arrow functions. And we should be getting the same result in the console. As you can see. And there we go. Some of the popular common array methods you come across with working on projects. And there are so many more, like every which we haven't covered here, but I'll leave a link in the description below and in the Slack community for a full list of array methods you can use on your arrays. Finally, let us look at how we can access array properties. So we had already looked at some sample of how we access array properties using the bracket notation. So I have to remember zero base index. So if we want to access 30, we have to say 2. And we should see 30 in our console. Great. So that's one way of accessing properties in our arrays. Another way, if you wanted to access the last element in an array, we use the length property and subtract by 1. As you can see, 40 is the last element in our array. And there we go. We have come to an end of this brief array tutorial, and I hope you have learned something. I'm going to leave links to more resources like array methods, more array properties, and learn more how we use arrays. Not to forget, arrays are also objects, but different types of objects. Now, next, we are going to start building JavaScript projects starting this week. Projects like calculators, websites, to polish up our front-end skills in HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So it's going to be fun, and I hope you learn more from those projects, which are meant to make you understand JavaScript better. So stay tuned for the projects, and I can't wait to see you next time when we start. But just before I go, there's a wonderful front end platform called Scrimba. I had a chat with Sandy D via LinkedIn and how we can improve our front end skill, and Scrimba came up. So I recommend you check it out. It's very beautiful. There are very multiple frameworks supported. There is JavaScript, there's React, there's Vue, and the lessons are interactive. You can code while watching the tutorials within the tutorials. So I definitely recommend you check out Scrimba. I'm also a member at Scrimba. I take my React and JavaScript courses there to improve my skills every day. So please check it out, sign up, sign in, start learning, and yeah, have fun. All right, thank you for watching. Next, we'll be starting out with our projects, JavaScript projects, and I'll be using ES6 syntax, which I'll be describing along the way. So do not worry, this should be fun. We'll look at the DOM element, how we work with the DOM using JavaScript, and so on and so forth. Until next time, see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. Please send out my videos more. And yeah, that's it. Bye bye. And don't forget to join the Slack community.